positioned independently of the apparent reality of the scene that suggests to us something more. Finishing our rotations, we arrive at the forgotten sibling, the cant, or roll, or Dutch tilt. It's a turn around the camera's long axis, the axis sticking straight out of the lens. But this one's kind of weird, because while we can talk about the visual experience of panning or tilting as analogs for real-world visual experiences that lend them to automatic and emotional attachments about scanning and falling and all sorts of things, go ahead and do a quick experiment about the Dutch tilt. Roll your head side to side, ears to shoulders, and take a look around. So first thing you should notice is that if you happen to be in public right now, you look like a crazy person. But the next thing is that if you were paying attention to how it changed your view of the world around you, the answer is it actually really doesn't. Because unless you have vertigo, your brain compensates for the roll your inner ear detects and visually stabilizes your field of view until you get it really far over. So we don't have much of an experiential history for the roll, which means when we see it on screen without our inner ear telling us to correct for the horizon shift, the meaning it tends to take on is just weirdness and disorientation, maybe dizzy or drunk or paranoid. Gaspar Noé does this in a big way at the end of Irreversible, while Carol Reed plays
when it gets dark, we go home. Just a perfect day. Feed animals in the zoo. Then later a movie too. And then home. yourself a toothbrush, dear.
10, Tricycle, The Shining. Getting things moving are the two uninterrupted
of the most imaginative and visionary filmmakers of our time. Throughout his acclaimed career, Del Toro's obsession with movie monsters has captured the hearts and minds of both critics and audiences worldwide. Each of Del Toro's films are instantly recognizable, as few directors can match the intricacy of his distinctive vision. After 25 years of movie making without an Academy Award, 2018's The Shape of Water won Del Toro the Oscar for Best Picture and Best Director. However, long before he dove into the depths of interspecies love, Del Toro tackled a whole range of creature creations transcending typical notions of horror and fantasy. Join us as we rank the maestro Guillermo del Toro's 10 movies from worst to best.
When you made The Shape of Water, did people say, why didn't you make it in Spanish? Why did you make it in English?
It was weird enough in any language.
Mimic. Anyone who's squeamish at the sight of bugs would do best to avoid Del Toro's first English-language movie, 1997's Mimic, in which entomologist Susan Tyler is on a quest to rid New York spreading cockroaches. Fighting fire with fire, Tyler genetically engineers new insects called the Judas breed to feed on the infected bugs. Unexpectedly, or perhaps expectedly, if you've ever seen a horror movie, the new creatures evolve in dangerous ways and take on a purpose of their own. While Mimic features Del Toro's renowned detailed character designs, his first Hollywood venture was ultimately a bitter experience. Creatively, he felt stifled by studio interference and has since disowned Mimic entirely. Crimson Peak. What do you get when you cross a haunted house movie and a gothic love story? For his ninth film, Del Toro blurred the usual boundaries of genre with 2015's Crimson Peak. This flick follows the dark love affair between American heiress Edith Cushing and English baronet Thomas Sharp. Swept away to Sharp's creepy yet magnificent house called Crimson Peak, the couple encounters imaginative red ghosts and the potential threat Thomas's sister Lucille brings. Marketed as an outright horror movie, reception to Crimson Peak was mixed, scoring a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, thanks largely to its stunning set design and unnerving visuals. Without the scares of Pan's Labyrinth, nor the romanticism in The Shape of Water, this gothic tale still sports Del Toro's typical style and sophistication. Pacific Rim. Del Toro's biggest money-making blockbuster, Pacific Rim, combines his love of Japanese mecha and menacing movie monsters. The story is a battle between destructive creatures called kaiju and the Earth's final savior, gigantic robots called Jaegers piloted by humans. Close to defeat, mankind's last resort is to enlist the help of a washed-up ex-pilot and a young trainee to stop the planet's impending doom. Flush with heart-pounding action sequences, Pacific Rim is not another mindless summer smash-up. Besides being a technical marvel, the characters themselves are rich in diversity and depth. In Del Toro's hands, these giant sea creatures and massive robots are packed with more personality than your standard monster flick.
I didn't want them to look like a certain mecha or to look like a certain piece of anime or another movie. I wanted them to be all on their own.
Cronos. Del Toro's first feature, 1994's Cronos, delivered one of his most outlandish concepts for a vampire film. An elderly antique dealer discovers an ancient artifact meant to grant eternal life. With his 8-year-old granddaughter, he tries to use the item's power for himself. But of course, things don't go as expected. Originally written for veteran actor Max von Sydow, the lead role is unusual as older men rarely take center stage in film. While sometimes struggling to maintain a balance between horror and comedy, Cronos still showed the Del Toro horror magic he would capitalize on later in his career. Hellboy. Well before superhero movies dominated theaters, in 2004, Guillermo del Toro struggled to bring his passion project, the comic book character Hellboy, to cinema. Played by longtime friend Ron Perlman, Hellboy is a surly, wisecracking demon groomed to be part of an elite paranormal secret defense team. Based on writer and illustrator Mike Mignola's acclaimed comic book series, Hellboy was a breath of fresh air in a world of vanilla superheroes. Del Toro fought to retain the spirit of the source material despite studio interference. Hellboy's humor and uniqueness prevailed, and Del Toro would expand Hellboy's universe in the film's sequel. Blade 2. 4 years after actor Wesley Snipes brought vampire hunter Blade to the big screen, the supernatural Marvel hero returned for a 2002 sequel with Del Toro in the director's chair. In Blade 2, Blade is pitted against a new threat of mutated, savage vampires known as the Reapers. To defeat them, he agrees to an unexpected truce and reunites with his former mentor. A second round of Blade's success was tricky as Del Toro had no involvement with the franchise previously. Fortunately, he used his experience on Cronos to expand the vampire mythology even further, diving headfirst into Blade's hedonistic underworld. Like Pacific Rim, Blade 2 lacks the finesse of Del Toro's smaller movies, but his underrated eye for action works exceptionally well here.
I wanted the violence to be balletic, to be almost like a musical number, so it would not have the yuck factor.
Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. The only sequel to one of his own films he actually returned to direct, in 2008 Del Toro returned for Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. In the sequel, our hero is caught in a power struggle between humanity and the invisible realm as Prince Nuada breaks an ancient truce to wage war on our world. With the help of his friends, Hellboy steps up to save Earth, but with conflict more complicated than it first appears. The Golden Army is clearly the film that Del Toro wanted to make all along. With the most lovable assortment of oddballs to hit the screen since the X-Men made their debut, the movie dazzles in both innovative action sequences and the characters' hilarious moments of downtime. Lost in the shuffle of a summer movie season headlined by both Iron Man and The Dark Knight, Hellboy 2 retained the same devoted appeal of the original Hellboy and remains one of the shining beacons of the comic superhero genre.
I just can't smile without you.
The Devil's Backbone. Del Toro's definitive ghost story, 2001's The Devil's Backbone, is set during the last days of the Spanish Civil War and follows Carlos, a 10-year-old boy sheltered in a school for orphans. Confronted by the hostility of fellow orphan Jaime, Carlos struggles to come to terms with his situation until he uncovers the secret of a ghost called Santi, who haunts the grounds. What comes next is obviously unpleasant. The Devil's Backbone is one of Del Toro's most personal films and excels by balancing the haunting scares with each character's emotional honesty. Both a creepy ghost story and powerful allegory for the politics of the time, The Devil's Backbone is easily one of Del Toro's best movies to date and arguably forms the backbone for everything he created after. The Shape of Water. Set in America circa 1962, Del Toro's best English-language film, The Shape of Water stars Sally Hawkins as Eliza, a lonely mute woman who spends her days eating eggs and cleaning a government installation. However, her life is changed forever when she and her co-worker Zelda discover a humanoid amphibian creature being abused by government operatives. Playing the leading fishman is Del Toro's frequently called-on character actor and contortionist, Doug Jones. Before the creature is Eliza plans to release the creature out of captivity but falls deeply in love with him along the way. The Shape of Water successfully blends Del Toro's fantasy leanings and his romantic streak in one cohesive, timeless story thanks to his impressive production design and glorious performances from the cast. Everything from its use of color to the unique way it tackles communication helps The Shape of Water transcend its bizarre subject matter into an Oscar-winning opus. With its powerful underdog message, the film is a true masterpiece and will continue to be discussed by critics and audiences alike for years to come.
No, what I do, I don't know what I do. I've been doing this for 25 years. So whatever fruit I give, you can say it's a pear or a pineapple. Whatever it is, that's what I do.
Pan's Labyrinth. Just like The Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth revisits the ramifications of the Spanish Civil War. But here, both the horror and fantasy elements are heightened further as the story follows Ophelia's venture into a legendary underground kingdom. Meanwhile, her stepfather plots to destroy a nearby guerrilla uprising. Scoring an impressive 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, Pan's Labyrinth is Del Toro's highest-rated movie and an undisputed triumph of filmmaking. Despite being filmed in Spanish, the movie became a surprise hit worldwide. Awards for Best Russian Cinematography and Makeup. Pan's Labyrinth became Del Toro's calling card and captured the themes of innocence and fantasy threaded throughout his entire filmography. The film is both stunning and unnerving in equal measure, and it's hard to imagine Del Toro ever creating another movie so wondrous. Click the loop around to subscribe to our YouTube channel, plus check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.
Somewhere where the light meets the lens, where the frame flatters the location, and the camera moves just right, an incredible image is born. These are the top 10 most beautiful movies of all time. Let's get right into it. Starting us off at number 10, it's Russian Ark. A 96-minute single uncut Steadicam shot through the Russian Hermitage Museum. Sure, it might sound like a gimmick at first, but the footage speaks for itself. A jaw-dropping location and brilliantly costumed characters fill the screen, lit with remarkable mood and variation by cinematographer Tilman Buettner, all coming together in an unbroken series of marvelously composed portraits. Of course, we considered a ton of other gorgeous films for this spot, because if we're talking Russia, we can't not mention Andrei Tarkovsky, especially his eerie, mixed film stock beauty from Stalker. And if we look around a little further in Europe, Colors trilogy, Ingmar Bergman's, well, everything, and definitely Jean-Pierre Junet's Amelie. But they can't quite outdo the Russian Ark, which is why it kicks off our list. Now, we can't fill up a whole list of gorgeous movies without a throwback or two to the OG of cinema, black and white. So for our next pick, we're looking at some of cinema's modern directors who decided to throw out the colors and get back to their roots with grayscale. And for that, we can't think of a better film than Manhattan, Woody Allen's 1979 love letter to New York City.
He adored New York City. He idolized it all out of proportion. He romanticized it all out of proportion.
And that's not to say there weren't other films that just missed our list. It was hard not to give a spot to Raging Bull or Schindler's List, but this black and white take on New York is timeless, thanks to cinematographer Gordon Willis, who decided to pair ultra-wide screen with black and white at Allen's suggestion, because that's how he remembered New York as a kid. Woody actually begged for it not to be released. Apparently this was his least favorite film he'd ever made, but to our eye, it's decadent, timeless, and full to the brim with stark imagery, which is why it made our list. Of course, when it comes to beautiful black and white, we can't discount the classics, the works of master cinematographers at home in their medium. And for that, we had a lot of choices. We've already mentioned Bergman's, but there's The Night of the Hunter, M and Metropolis, Rules of the Game, 8½, especially The Third Man. But even The Third Man doesn't quite live up to Orson Welles' other masterpiece and our number 8 pick, Citizen Kane.
Here's a man that could have been president, who was as loved and hated and as talked about as any man in our time. But when he comes to die, he's got something on his mind called Rosebud.
Citizen Kane is basically an entire film of staging and deep focus technique seemed revolutionary. But the craziest part is that this was Orson Welles' first film ever as a director. He had no idea what he was doing. He learned everything he knew from watching classics and essentially just borrowed every technique that grabbed his eye. The result was a tapestry woven of the best of cinema from around the world, free from the limitations of experience, and one of the most beautiful films to boot. Next up at number 7, we're turning our eyes to space. The masters of cinema have always tended to do something extra special when it comes to their depiction of heavenly bodies. And while Chivo gave us a breathtaking look at Earth and gravity, and Alvin Kugler captured the beauty of the sun in Sunshine, there's nothing in the universe quite like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Now, some of you might immediately think of the admittedly impressive hypnotic neon Stargate sequence when we talk about 2001's visuals, but there's hardly a single frame that isn't intricately designed, immaculately composed, and stunningly lit. With a tendency towards central framing and striking symmetrical compositions, Stanley Kubrick and Jeffrey Unsworth are at their visual best, whether composing celestial ballets or staging spacewalks. However, if we're talking about Kubrick, we have to throw in a brief honorable mention for Barry Lyndon. Just look at it. Every single frame is a Renaissance painting. Of course, singling out directors when it comes to gorgeous imagery is a bit like singling out jockeys at the Kentucky Derby. Sure, they're important, but they're not the ones running the race. So if we're talking cinematographers, we think Vittorio Storaro is one to know. This guy's rap sheet could make up this whole list. He shot Apocalypse Now, Last Tango in Paris, The Last Emperor, and our number 6, The Conformist. Directed by Bernardo Bertolucci, The Conformist conjures up a stunning palette of fascism, from the hard illumination that bars the characters behind beams of light to the compositions that highlight Marcello's tragic inability to conform. It's artfully conceived, meticulously crafted, and brutally beautiful, and definitely worth checking out. Next up, we want to honor the extraordinary imagery of imagination. We love looking at big fish and what dreams may come for painting us a picture of a mythical story and telling us the story of a living painting, respectively. But for our pick, number 5 can be none other than Tarsem Singh's The Fall.
I will search the four corners of this earth, find Governor Odious, and joyously kill him.
Half 1930s hospital, half little girl's imagination, plus a totally random but still really pretty slow-motion black and white title sequence. The Fall is basically the best ever filmic excuse to just show off. Shot over 4 years in the most awe-inspiring parts of 28 countries, cinematographer Colin Watkinson filled the screen with so many gorgeous tableaus that there are literally half-second throwaway shots that are more beautiful than the entire oeuvres of lesser DPs. Now, we've spent plenty of this list looking at the handsome cinematography of Americans and Europeans, but we've yet to turn our lens to the Asiatic region. We've circled back to it time and again for fight scenes, wardrobes, and now cinematography. And if I were a betting voiceover man, I'd bet it was one of the writer's favorite films. But for our number 4, it's hard to deny the visual virtuoso of Hero. Sure, we could have picked Kurosawa's Ren or Ron Kar-wai's In the Mood for